We have many important people from the Albanian American community. Ilir Circa is here, representing the National Albanian American Caucus. We have members of the New York City Council, June Iceland and Stanley Michaels, who join us today, who have been very, very supportive in terms of the human rights for Kosova. I spoke on the floor of the House this morning, and I said that the killing in Kosova must stop. The ethnic cleansing and the genocide must stop. I showed a picture of an Albanian baby who was murdered by Milosevic's henchmen, and the caption said that his mother will never have to see him this way because they killed her too. It is unbelievable that in 1999 we are still talking about genocide and ethnic cleansing on the continent of Europe. And I want to announce that I am in full support of the President's policies towards Kosova. And let me just say, I say Kosova with an A, because 92% of the people that live there are ethnic Albanians, and they call it Kosova. And if that's what they call it, that's what I call it. We have seen for many, many years Serb oppression against the ethnic Albanians in Kosova. But in the past year, this oppression has intensified, and we have seen the wanton killing of innocent men, women, and children, unarmed civilians, who are just being massacred, reminiscent of what went on during the Nazi era on the continent of Europe in the 1940s. This Congress, 2 weeks ago, supported a resolution supporting the deployment of United States troops as part of a NATO contingent force in Kosova. And just yesterday, the United States Senate went on record as supporting bombing strikes. Now, bombing is a last resort, and I support the bombing strikes. And it is a last resort only because Slobodan Milosevic, the butcher of Kosova, has revolts and desires, because the Albanians want independence. And by the way, I am a supporter of independence for Kosova, because I believe that once the former Yugoslavia broke up several years ago, the other ethnic groups in the former Yugoslavia were entitled and were granted a self-determination and independence. The Croats, the Slovenians, the Bosnians, the Macedonians, all part of the former Yugoslavia, opted for independence. And if they were entitled to have self-determination, I believe the same thing should be true of the Kosovar Albanians. They are entitled to self-determination. The Albanians signed on because they believe in peace. Unfortunately, Mr. Milosevic does not. And let me say, the Serbian people are the ones who are suffering under this brutal tyrant's dictatorship. And so, Milosevic, time and time again, was given a chance to sign on and has absolutely refused. It still may not be too late. He still may have a chance to sign on to this agreement, allowing NATO troops on the ground. But if he doesn't, the bombs surely will fall, and it is imminent. And the suffering of his people will be no one's fault but Slobodan Milosevic's. We cannot allow genocide and ethnic cleansing, and it must stop. And what NATO is doing now is saying that it will not allow ethnic cleansing. Now, NATO obviously is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and it's concerned with Europe and the North Atlantic. And that's why it is absolutely appropriate for NATO to become involved, because again, this is genocide on the face of Europe. Now, I want to answer one thing, and I'm going to turn over to my colleagues. For people who say this is not in America's interests, vital interests, I say it absolutely is. First of all, as the leader of the free world, it's in our interest to make sure that ethnic cleansing and genocide ends. Secondly, if we do nothing now, we will see a wider war in the Balkans, which will ultimately suck in America's allies, Turkey, Greece, and our new ally, Hungary, as well as other nations, Albania, Macedonia, Bulgaria. So to act now would be to continue the genocide and ultimately would lead to a larger scale war. So it is in America's vital interest to act now.
All Americans must come together for a number of reasons. One, this is clearly in our national interest, as Congressman Engel pointed out. Secondly, it's important for the credibility of NATO. Thirdly, and most importantly, we're talking about the protection of the most basic human rights of the Albanian Kosovars. I've been in Pristina with Congressman Engel. I've seen the police state tactics of the Serbs. There's absolutely no doubt that the genocide that's being carried out must be condemned. It must be stopped. No one wants to resort to war. No one wants to resort to airstrikes. But the fact is, there is no alternative. To stand back and do nothing, to allow this genocide to go on, would be a terrible, terrible violation of the most fundamental human rights. It would also cause a much greater conflagration in the future. As Congressman Engel pointed out, we're talking about many countries that are involved here. This certainly can and likely will spill over if it's not stopped now. But ultimately, we're talking about defending human rights, the liberty, the freedom of the Kosovars.
And I think hopefully the Serbian people will realize that Milosevic has led them down a terrible path of destruction, and hopefully that if he doesn't come to his senses, the Serbian people will come to their senses and depose him. You know, there were demonstrations for well over a year in the streets of Belgrade in opposition to Milosevic's rule. Unfortunately, he's been able to outmaneuver the opposition.
I think it's important for the American people to realize that there are good guys and bad guys in this conflict. And this is not a civil war that can be or should be confined within the borders of Yugoslavia, nor is this the occupation of a territory. It was the brutal repression of a people. The Kosovar Albanians have not looked for trouble. All they have wanted to do was to raise their families, to earn a living, and to have some semblance of control over their lives and their communities. After World War II, Kosovo should have been combined with Albania, but because Russia requested of President Truman, to appease Russia at the time, who had been an ally, let Russia put Kosovo within the Yugoslav Confederation there, and they didn't belong there. And it was only because of this battle that occurred in the 14th century that the Serbians insisted. But it was not a natural alliance. Nevertheless, Kosovo was a peaceful place under Tito. These are not warring people. And in fact, when they had an opportunity to have a democratic election, they elected a pacifist. Ibrahim Rugova is a pacifist. He's a poet, a philosopher. He was their elected leader. And for years, when Slobodan Milosevic came down and used Kosovo to rise to power.
Any peace agreement cannot work without the deployment of NATO troops on the ground. That is a given. Milosevic has violated every agreement that he's ever signed. Back in October, he signed an agreement with Richard Holbrooke, who came out. He violated every aspect of that agreement. He was supposed to have troops leave Kosova, and he didn't have that. He was supposed to have a cap on the police. He increased the amount of police. The oppression and the repression continued. We've seen the summary execution of unarmed civilians, men, women, and children. So you cannot believe him. So the only thing that will keep the peace, that will keep him honest.
And it is not just we, the United States. It is NATO acting. We would only put 15 on the ground. The reason why we're using air power is because we have such vast superiority. But air power is needed today. NATO is needed, and the U.S. leadership of NATO is needed. We are doing the right thing. It is a principled thing. It is a moral thing. And it is a thing that is directly in our interest. We need security and stability in Europe. And if we don't act now, we will not have security and stability. We will empower every thug like Milosevic that is waiting out there, hoping that the United States will be enfeebled by people wanting not to get involved, by their isolationist tendencies, hoping the United States is not as powerful as they know it can be, is not as principled. We empower Milosevic. We empower all the thugs around the world who would like to be little despots. We can't let that happen.
And just as the way people are wrong when they try to portray this as a civil war, this is not a civil war. This is a war against a people. It's a war against the ethnic Albanians, whether it's because of their religion, whether it's because of their ethnicity. It is a war against these people. Now, for many, many years, there was an elections by the Kosovar Albanians, and elected Dr. Ibrahim Rugova as their leader. And for many years, there was not any improvement on the ground. In fact, many of us who I had the opportunity to meet with Milosevic 2 years ago in Belgrade for well over an hour. And I told him that he ought to sit down with Rugova and give the Albanians the freedoms to which they are entitled. Milosevic would not admit this much in terms of Albanian oppression against the Albanians. He kept telling me I was misinformed, who's feeding me such lies, and when I quoted statistics and accuracy, he just would absolutely stonewall and deny it. So this is an oppression against a people. It's not a civil war. To me, it's only natural that if people see on the ground that there's been no improvement year after year after year, that you would have more militancy, particularly amongst the young people who don't see any improvement. So it's very easy to call a group terrorists. The fact of the matter is, Mr. Milosevic has nobody to blame but himself. If he didn't oppress the Kosovar Albanians, there'd be no need for an uprising.
Ladies and gentlemen, the reason that we are here today is that we are here in the name of peace to try and save the lives of the Albanian women and children who are being slaughtered by Slobodan Milosevic's criminals. We suddenly now find ourselves as the only superpower, and we must not waver in our newfound strength in the face of despots and criminals who are torturing innocent people. Before me, you heard an eloquent response and reasoning as to why this issue is an American issue. President Clinton yesterday laid out very clearly why this is an American issue. It's an American issue because it prevents a further escalation of war in the Balkans, and it's an American issue because genocide and ethnic cleansing is being committed. Those are American issues. In our Constitution, it clearly states that our way of life, our democratic way of life, is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, regardless of race, color, or creed. And we now find ourselves in a situation where it is no longer providing just for the people on our shores, but our true greatness as a nation and as a way of life is to go beyond our borders and to protect the innocent. And so we thank our congressman for being here today, and we thank you for being here today in the name of peace to save the lives.
Thank you very much, Congressman Engel. I want to say very briefly that as Albanian Americans, but as Americans first, we are proud that our country, this great nation, is taking steps to end genocide in Kosova. That is reason number one that we are there, and reason number one that this conflict is in our national interest. We have an interest in ending genocide in the heart of Europe. If we can't end it there, we'll be hard-pressed to end genocide or prevent it anywhere else in the world. So that's reason number one. The second reason is the conflict in Kosovo cannot be contained within Kosovo's borders. It is in our national interest to stop the conflict before it spreads, because it will spread and it will destabilize the Balkans and it will destabilize Europe if the United States and NATO does not take action. So we are proud today as Americans that our president and our country, together with our NATO partners, are taking action to stop the genocide, to stop the slaughter. In our struggles and throughout our effort, what has made us strong is all of you in the communities, making a difference, going to the demonstrations, giving your money to campaigns, helping the rebels fight back home, helping your relatives and others live a decent life. All of you have made the difference, and for that I'm proud of you and I salute you. As an organization, what we've tried to do is be of service to your community, to our communities. Our organization is here to serve you. We work for you, not the other way around. But in addition to us and what we do in Washington, the more important work really is done here in the United States Congress. And we have been very fortunate to have lots of friends in the U.S. Congress, people who have stood by us, who have worked for us, who have worked with us, who have made a difference for Albanian freedom, who continue to fight the fight. And for them, we are thankful. And we are also honored to have them as our friends. Tonight, we are honored to have members of Congress join us for this, I think, historic dinner. The first friend who has come to join us is a member of Congress from the state of New York. She represents a lot of people in this room. She has traveled to the Balkans. She was in Rambouillet a few weeks ago, meeting with the American delegation, meeting with the Albanian delegation, making the case for a referendum on independence, making the case for airstrikes on Serb targets. I want to introduce to you the Congresswoman from the great state of New York, Sue Kelly.
Thank you. I'm really happy to see so many of you here doing work that is absolutely necessary. I thank Lear. I also want to thank Harry Bertari. I want to thank Avi and several other people that were with me at Rambouillet as we sat there trying to talk, trying to get some sense into hopefully trying to reach the Serbs, even if we did it only through public relations. Because this is so important for every one of us in this room. What you are doing here today, and what you have done by meeting with your congressman, is an educational job. It must be done. I can stand here and tell you that I am one of the people in Congress who believes very strongly that we must support your efforts. But there are people in Congress who do not believe that. There are people in Congress who do not believe that we should put planes there. Who do not believe that we should be bombing even as I speak. There are people in Congress who would like to stop the conflict, but they want to have it a nice, clean stop without any American involvement, thank you. That can't happen. If America is going to continue to be the leader of the united world, as I believe we are, if we are going to lead the world, we must go ahead and do the jobs that are necessary, whether we like them or not. And this is one, I don't believe anyone really wants to put any of our sons and daughters, our husbands and our wives in front of a gun. But you've been doing it. And now we're doing it to support you. Because it must be done. We must stop a madman. We must stop a murderer. And the only way I know how to do it at this point is to do exactly what our president has finally decided to do. He should have done it 4 years ago in my estimation, but quite frankly, he's doing it now and that's good. What we need from you in Congress is for you to continue your educational efforts. People have not known about the Balkans. They've not focused on the Balkan area. They need to know about Kosova. They need to understand history. Many people have said to me, oh, but it's a part of Serbia. They don't understand the history of the Kosovo people. It's up to you to teach the members of Congress. You've done a wonderful job so far, but I encourage you to continue to do that. Please, please, talk to your congressmen. Please reach ones that you don't even know but are in neighboring states. The more you do, the better off it is for all of you and all of we who support you in Congress. And I want to tell you, the Albanian American Council has done a fabulous job.
Yesterday, Senator Joe Lieberman of Connecticut, and many of you know, came over to me on the floor of the Senate last night. He said, I heard what you had to say down at the White House. He said, I think it makes a lot of sense. And so this is just beginning. I know for a lot of you who follow these issues carefully, it's been going on a long time already. But for many people here in Congress, a focus on this issue, and for the American people, a focus on this issue is just beginning. And so I want you to know that as far as my one voice is concerned, this is what I think ought to be done. I'm glad that this is your view as well. And we're going to stick with this policy as long as we can and try to lead the administration in the right direction to achieve a just and fair settlement of this dispute. So I thank you very much for the warm reception and look forward to working with you.
Young man, how are you?
They said that O.J. Simpson had a dream team, but I think we have the dream team, and they're right here. I want to introduce to you someone who's been our best friend in the U.S. Congress, someone who's worked with us and for us day in, day out to make a difference for the people of Kosova and Albanians wherever they live in this country and throughout the Balkans. I know that there's going to be a vote over on the House side fairly quickly, so let me introduce to you first Congressman Elliot Engel.
Thank you very much, Aaliyah, and thanks all of you for the nice, warm welcome. I'm sure my colleagues, Pete King and Joe Crowley, feel the same way, that we wish when we went to our districts we got some. I want to just very briefly no one knows Milosevic better than the Albanians. And they know that he's not a man to be trusted, that he breaks every promise he makes, he lies to your face, and he is the worst thing going, not only for the Albanian people, but for his own people. He keeps his own people in misery. He manipulates nationalism. That's how he stays in power. But I think this time he outsmarted himself. And President Clinton is to be commended for his brave and courageous actions in this effort. So I just want to welcome you all to Washington. It's so good to see so many people here. Those of you who were at the press conference earlier this morning know that my colleagues and I and others that aren't here made some statements. And I said that I really think that the Albanian American community has really come of age. Like other ethnic communities in the United States, they understand the process. They understand how important it is to get involved. You understand that you have made a difference. You have made a difference. We are here, and we have the votes, and we can carry the fight on the House floor. But if we didn't have all of you behind us, every step of the way, believe me, it would be an impossible job. So you have made the difference. I want to commend you. Again, I'm delighted that the National Albanian American Council is doing so well. You'll always have my support. And let me just conclude by saying we want an independent and free Kosova. We want a war.
Our very, very good friend, Congressman Pete King.
I would join with Elliot and Jim Moran and Joe Crowley in thanking all of you for being here tonight, for giving us the opportunity to be with you on this truly historic day when the United States is standing up against its aggression, against genocide, for self-determination, and for the people of Kosova. This is a very, very historic day, because finally the United States has realized what must be done in You cannot negotiate with Milosevic. You cannot bargain with Milosevic. He only understands power. He only understands force. He only understands military action. I want to thank all of you for the efforts that you've made over the years to awaken the conscience of the American people, to alert the American people and the American Congress as to the terrible atrocities that are being carried out against the Albanian Coast Guards. It's just terrible what's gone on for these years. The genocide has been carried out, but now because of your efforts, because of the tremendous leadership in the Congress, from Eliot Engel and others, we are now on the verge, I believe, of victory, of stopping Milosevic in his tracks, of realizing that the people of Kosova are entitled to self-determination, to autonomy, and yes, to independence. You're entitled to that, you will get it, and tonight, I believe, is the most major step ever taken by our country and by NATO to bring that result about. So Milosevic's days are numbered. The aggression against the people of Kosova is going to come to an end, and we must all stand together as one in these days and weeks and months ahead, because victory is there. It's going to be obtained. It's going to be because of all of you. So thank you for having us tonight, and let us never forget the historic moment that all of us are going through right now. This is a great moment in American history. It's a great moment for all of you. It's a great thing for decent men and women everywhere. Thank you all.
Our good friend, Joe Crow.
Thank you all very much. I just got noticed I have the beeper on. We just got beeped for a vote. So I'll be very brief. I know that Jim Moran wants to say a few words. He got to go ahead of me last time, and I know how that felt. It won't be the same, but I go, Jim, don't worry. I just had an opportunity to speak on the floor. I've only been here 2.5 months, and I have to tell you that this moment was one of the most moving moments I've had so far on the floor of the House of Representatives. Our young men and women right now, American men and women, are putting their lives on the line. They're putting their lives on the line for justice, against tyranny, against a slaughter of his own people. The butcher of Belgrade is getting a lesson this evening and for the next couple of days. And he's feeling what it feels like to have a person or a bigger entity let him know what force feels like. And that's what we're doing now. I have just a short moment here. I just want to let you know that it has been a pleasure for me to work with my colleagues, Eliot Engel, Peter King, Jim Moran, and others, Aliyah Zerker, with all the members from the Albanian community who have helped to bring this issue to the forefront. My colleagues did it in former Congresses. I'm only happy to be here now to share in that education process. I dare say that a month ago, the people of America knew very little about Kosovo and where it was. I can tell you right now, people know where it is. And the American people are beginning to understand why we have to have a presence in that part of the world. Not only for human rights purposes, but for America's purposes as well. Our own security is at risk. The security of the world is at risk. And our men and women, I want you to keep this in mind tonight. Before you go to bed tonight, say an extra prayer for our men and women, for all the NATO forces that are putting their lives on the line this evening. So that the Albanian community in Kosova will be free in the near future. Thank you all, and God bless.
We got to go vote because this vote is to show support for our troops and what they're doing over in Kosovo and what they're doing to that thug Slobodan Milosevic. But let me tell you, I want to get this out. My buddy Elliot here, you know, we went over there. We wanted to go to Pristina. We wanted to see what was going on, and it wasn't the first time that we were going there. And that son of a gun stopped us at the border. He wouldn't let us get in. So we're getting in now, I'll tell you. You don't stop us, and you don't stop the cause of freedom and democracy and the respect for human rights, and you go there. going next week. A couple other members, we're going to be over in Italy, and we're going to go over there. They, again, obviously, they don't want us going in now. We're going to go over to Skopje. But, look, we are not in this just because we support Albanian Americans. We're not just in this because we've got friends that have relatives. We are in this that are under jeopardy and under threat from a thug. We are in this because this is the principled thing to do, principled ways. Just quickly, you know, Franklin Roosevelt once told Winston Churchill after World War II that after we wasted so many American lives and billions of dollars, I'll be damned if I'm going to let the colonial powers take over where the fascists left.
I want to thank all of you for coming today. Earlier this century, it was the United States that made the difference to create an Albanian state and to preserve an Albanian state. It is the United States at the end of the century that's making a difference to stop genocide in Kosova and to give us a chance to build our institutions and to fight for the freedom that we know we will have one day, and we will be free one day.